everyone, this is Bob Martin with the NautilusDrydocks.com, and I am very happy to begin this multi-video walkthrough of the 1/48 scale Disney Nautilus model kit put out by yours truly and the Nautilus Drydocks. Before we get started, I want to put a big shout out to Mark Brand, who did the original files for this Nautilus kit, and then he and I worked together to modify it specifically for the Nautilus Drydocks, and for those of you interested, for eventual application as a fully functional remote controlled vehicle. What you're going to see is a video walkthrough step by step as we build the kit behind me. So let's get a few things out of the way first. Absolutely, first and foremost, thank you for your investment in this model kit. It's been a labor of love for myself, Mark, and the crew at the Nautilus Drydocks here for a while, and I'm happy to see it brought into physical form. Now, this kit is a multimedia kit, which means you're going to see various construction materials used putting it together. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, something that is equivalent to a plastic injection molded kit. So if your only modeling experience is with those plastic model kits put out by companies like Revell and Bronco, etc., you are not going to see the same construction principles applied to here. It requires a little bit of a different mindset and a little bit different set of skills. If you are an absolute novice builder, I want you to stop right now before you pull the trigger on this kit. It may not be for you. Hopefully, this video walkthrough will give you the confidence to tackle it, but do be aware this is not a beginner kit. Next order of business. The kit is somewhat delicate and it is resin. For those of you familiar with resin kits, you're going to know exactly what I'm about to talk about. For those of you that don't, this is a little bit of an education session for you. Resin is a beautiful medium that carries detail very well. It can be exceptionally durable, and it is very suitable for the creation of model kits. What does tend to happen, however, are two things. One, parts can warp. This is a thermally, unstable product, so heat will cause the material to soften. It can sag, it can warp, particularly if you don't get to the kit in a while and store it improperly. You'll see a lot of wavy parts that will need to be addressed. Now, it's certainly not the end of the world if this happens. They're something that can be rectified very easily. We'll get into that because no doubt there's going to be one or two in this build. Second off, because they are fragile and the resin is somewhat brittle in nature, it is to be expected that one or two parts may be broken when you get them. They typically go back together exceptionally well. The parts fit back together again, just like a broken glass, with not even a seam after you glue them back together again. If you get your kit and there are broken parts, if they are small and easily repairable, you are expected to repair them. So I think probably the first thing that we're going to want to do is go through the kit in detail, become familiar with all the parts and the terminology that I'm going to use during the assembly of the kit. So we're just going to scan our peepers on this array of parts that we have here. And as the basis for this conversation, we're going to use the parts list that should have come with your kit. It may look like this. This was the preliminary one that was put out for the prototype. These are going to get revised with the new versions. Once we go through this, we'll add to it, make sure that it's nice and comprehensive, because it does not include things like the windows, the floodlight lenses, and the acrylic tube, etc. But let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and start off on this side And we're going to go through each one of these parts one by one so you understand what they are. So the first thing that you can see is pretty self-explanatory. We've got a stand. We've got a left side, a right side, and two intermediate parts right here that form the spacer that go in between. Looking at it, you can see very easily how this is going together. It gets sleeved and glued. We've also got a display plaque. Those are going to come with the new kits. Some of the original ones weren't shipped with them. They were not included at that time, but the new revised kits are included. If you do want one, just let me know. I have them available at a very, very reasonable price. Wheelhouse part. And then we have the slider bar for the breathers here. And that is what's going to allow all of the breathers to actuate up and down. Then there's the cover strip that goes underneath there to protect that mechanism. We have our rear window surround right here. That obviously goes on the rear window. Wheelhouse floor. We've got our wheelhouse railing, spiral staircase railing, the ship's wheel, the dive levers, and spiral staircase. This is a really beautiful part of the boat that's going to be a ton of fun to put together. I'm going to move over here. We got our tail section, and this part here is removable. This is the cover section for the rear actuation if you're going to go the RC route. If not, you simply slide it into place and glue it down. Part and parcel of that is the tilting propeller mechanism right here. And over here we've got a couple of strange looking mounting brackets. These four become the mounting flanges for the Salon kit. Now if you're not doing a Salon, you don't need to worry about these. You can throw them in the garbage. The similar parts here are for mounting a watertight cylinder. And we'll get into that in another video. This display build is not going to utilize them. If you're not building an RC model, you don't need to worry about those. Moving along into the skiff, we've got our oars. And I do want to mention, obviously you can see these like to warp. They're very, very thin and fragile. It's up to you whether or not you want to display your model with those oars in there or not. You can heat them up, straighten them out, and they're going to look really good. We have our skiff covers, and these are going to eventually be fully retractable. Really, really cool. The Salon basils. And we've got our forward trim tabs. The iris shutters that obviously go kind of behind like this. We've got our skiff hold downs. These are just little hatch wheels that make it look like the skiff gets locked down there. We got our cleats and bollards right here and here. And our ladder rungs. This is our sliding hatch assembly right here. The 5 breathers. We've got our rudder, forward dive planes, aft dive planes, our propeller shroud struts. Those go in the back of the boat there. The dorsal fin. Obviously, this is a propeller. Call this the raker arch. And then these 3 components make up the lockdown mechanism, the forward ram there. Moving down here, this unit is called the spiral speed indicator. We've got the stairwell sides, the stairwell door, and the stairwell stairs. The propeller shrouds, left and right. 2 anchors. We've got 3 hatches. One is large, and then we got 2 smaller ones. And then we've got what's called the camera obscura hatch. That goes on the top of the wheelhouse. Now we got a couple of pieces of acrylic plastic here for the rear window of the wheelhouse. Some acrylic tube for your depth gauge. 4 clear acrylic windows. 2 for the wheelhouse and 2 for the Salon. And then we've got your collection of Google eyes, and these are going to be used to create the clear plastic domes for the floodlights. We've also got the main hull pieces, and this is obviously pretty self-explanatory. If you hold or lay them all out, you'll see immediately whether or not you're missing something. Lower hull, forward section, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then the upper hull section, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pieces. Optional, you've got the crewman. There's, how many is there? There's like 9 or 10 crew right there, including some divers. And of course the hero crew, as well as 2 crewmen to steer the boat, if you so desire. Another optional accessory is the LED lighting kit that's going to come in a little package. It looks exactly like this. So one thing I nearly forgot were the deck grates. And you've got your 7 different pieces of deck grates. You've got your foremost section, the 2 side pieces that go next to the wheelhouse. And then you've got your pieces that go right next to that dorsal hatch, dorsal hatch. And then the aftmost deck grate there as well. And then another optional piece that you're going to see if you get it is the little motorized motor that allows you to get that propeller rotating at a nice stately speed if you elect to purchase that option. Let's take a look at more options here. This is the Salon kit, and some of you will have a different version of that. They would have come in sections. This is the newest version that's a little bit more simple because they're all joined together to make single pieces. The left and right side of the salon area, your settee couches, and then you should have single piece here that has your overhead gauge, the hutch, the writing desk, and then the hutch, and then the Davenport, your fountain, the specimen table, the organ pedals, which are hiding underneath there, and the organ bench at the very back. And then you got your ballast tubes left and right. Now this is really a starter kit. This salon area could easily turn into twice the model that the actual boat is, just because there are so many hundreds of different details that you could literally put in there if you wanted. Okay, we've gone over the kit itself. Now let's talk about the tools that you're going to need in order to successfully construct it. First and foremost, you're going to need an area. You're going to want very good lighting, a large open space to set all of your parts out on, and you need to make sure it's going to be undisturbed throughout the course of your build. The last thing you want is for your significant other to come in and tell you to clear off the kitchen counter because they need to make dinner. Find a good area, stake it out, make sure you've got a month or so to have it out there and work on it where you're going to be undisturbed. You need access to power, and as I mentioned before, good lighting. Get all that down, and you got your foundation in place. Okay, tools. This is what I came up with here. Now I may come up with additional ones or optional ones throughout the course of the build, but this is going to get you started. Heat gun. You could also use a hair blow dryer. This is going to be used to straighten out any warped parts. You potentially could also use boiling water, that sort of thing. Or if you're exceptionally dexterous and experienced, you can also get away in using a blowtorch, which I have right over there. In the back there, we got the various adhesives that we're going to be using. This is a spray accelerator for cyanoacrylate glues, thin, medium, and gel cyanoacrylate. I use Starbond, but any cyanoacrylate will be just fine. I will say I am a massive fan of this Gorilla Super Glue Gel. So if you want to recommendation. I would definitely go with that one. And then we're going to be using this 3M Marine Fast Cure 5200. And this is just going to be a really bulletproof, big, heavy, nasty reinforcement of the main hull joints to make sure that this boat doesn't come apart on you. Got some masking tape. We've got some soldering supplies if you do decide to go with the LED light kit. Rotary tool. I cannot tell you how much this is going to be useful. If you don't have one, even just for your household, I highly, highly recommend it. You're going to want various bits, and we'll get into that throughout the course of the build. A good set of tweezers, some dividers, sharp hobby knife with extra blades, pencil, ruler, and then I've got some Q-tips here to help absorb glue and all that fun stuff. Well, I guess that's enough procrastination. It's time to start gluing stuff together. Let's get started. Okay, before we get deep into it, there's going to be some general parts prep that I am going to go into right now that you're probably not going to see because you're going to get sick and tired of me repeating it over and over again. First off, you want to take all of the parts and wash them down with a solution of warm water and mild dish soap. That's just going to clear off any sort of chemicals or anything that's left over from the actual production methods that were used to make the parts. So warm soapy water, give it a good scrub with a soft bristle brush, make sure you get everything off of there. The other thing, as a general rule, any joint made, so when you put two parts together, I highly recommend just taking some like medium grit or fine grit sandpaper. This is a 220 grit that I have here, and sanding the mating surfaces. This will absolutely ensure that there are no chemicals to interfere with the adhesion of the different glues that we're going to be using in there. But what it also does is exponentially increases the surface area of the bond. So perfectly smooth parts aren't going to be bound together as well as two that have rough surfaces. The glues are going to get into all the nooks and crannies and really hold on tightly. So general part prep, clean them. Warm soapy water, sand the mating surfaces, the two mating faces, lightly with like a 200 or a 220 grit sandpaper. We're off to the races. All right, let's do this. I always like to start with the stand. It gives you something to put your boat on where it's not flopping around and breaking stuff off. As I mentioned, cleaned, joints are sanded. Weapon of choice is going to be this gel cyanoacrylate. Now this gel actually has a little bit of like give in it, I guess you could say. It's not as brittle as a lot of cyanoacrylates are, so that's why I really like to use it. Putting a pretty generous little goober on there, but staying back from the actual joint itself. I'm going to press the center section on there, making sure that everything feels nice and flush. That looks good. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. There we go. So make sure that you press these seams down and that the top is flush, sides are flush. If you're feeling confident about it, you can spritz it. Give it a little spritz with some accelerator. That'll flow into the joint through capillary action, fuse that cyanoacrylate together. If you're feeling confident with that, move on to the other side, glue that in, and we'll keep going. All right, once you are confident that you've got it glued, everything looks good, you can actually spin it over and hit it with a little bit of accelerator on the inside too, just to make sure everything is kicked off as you move it. You do not need accelerator, by the way. Accelerator just accelerates. That's all it does. But as I said, once you've got that done, we're going to grab our sandpaper and we're going to go over these seams really well. Now, just a note. Oh, I got you all shaking there like an earthquake. The proper way of doing this that you're probably going to want to do is to fill that joint with putty. Now, for glazing putty, I recommend Nitrostan. You can get it. Typically comes in a pretty big tube. It's a really high quality product. But you can also use just standard modeling putty that you get for filling gaps. Or you can use what I really like is a 2-part automotive filler. That kicks off really nicely. It sands really, really easily. The product that I like to use is called Evercoat Rage. Not cheap, but it is going to be absolutely the best 2-part filler that you can possibly get. Exceptionally smooth, easy to apply, kicks off really nice, and sands like a dream. Evercoat Rage. Highly recommend it. But let's get back to sanding. Okay, before I go about filling these joints here, I want to go over connecting the upper hull parts together. And the reason we're going to start with the upper hull is because it is the most visible part of the boat. You could do the lower hull first, certainly, but if you put the upper hull on and it's not absolutely perfect and you end up with little gaps, it's much, much better to have any potential gaps or work that you've had to do to correct them under the boat, where people aren't going to see them, and where you don't need to look at it and say every time you look at it, oh man, I wish I would have done the upper hull first. So we're going to grab a couple upper hull pieces, and we're going to show you how they go together. So I've got hull 1 and hull 2 of the upper hull here. I'm going to just slip them on. We're going to do a little test fit here. Now I can immediately see that hull 1 is a little warped. You can see it's sticking out over there. Now, you could probably go ahead and just squeeze it. Actually, it fits pretty good if you just squeeze it. But what we're actually going to do for this, I'm going to go ahead and adhere one side first. And then we're going to do a little heat action with the heat gun. And we're just going to relax everything and get it fitting perfectly. So, again, we're going to take our gel sandacrylate. I'm only going to do the starboard side. Doesn't matter if you do starboard or port. It's completely up to you. But I'm just going to do starboard side. I'm going to lay a little bead of the gel in there. And don't forget the side keel right there. And again, I roughed up the mating surfaces, all right? Can't overemphasize the need to do that for a good bond. And we're gonna grab it and we're gonna hold it right here with the seam. I don't know if you can see that. It's like you can't even see it. It's so good right there. Now that's only one side. We're gonna get to the other side. I'll show you what the other side looks like. It's not as pretty. It's the ugly stepchild of seams. But once this gets kicked off a little bit, where at a point I can let it go, we're going to accelerate it and just let it kick off. Don't rush this. Trust me, the last thing you want to do is think you have it, and you let go of it, and you set it down, and you start monkeying around with it, and then it falls apart. Just take your time. Chill out. Relax. Make sure it's set. You know, hit it from the inside, too. And the bottom. All right. Now look at that other side. Oh man, I'm sure you guys would be saying right now, what a piece of garbage this kit is. I want my money back. And then I would laugh at you and say, nope, this is what you do. You get your heat gun. I have to go get my heat gun. Found it. It was right where I left it. Okay. Where this is going to flex, obviously, going to be up at the top here, but we're just going to heat this entire side. Now, less is more, ladies and gentlemen. You don't want to heat the hell out of this and have it all warp all to pieces, all right? So all down the length, nice and gentle and easy. I'm talking now because once I get this fired up, you won't be able to hear me. Nice and easy along the hull. Just give it a little squeeze. If it's fighting you, a little bit more. If it's still fighting you, a little bit more until it's ready to go. Once it's done, we're going to lick some glue underneath there, clamp it down, Oh yeah. Looking good. Looking good. Now, if you hold these pieces in their correct positions right now, very quickly they are going to cool down and lock themselves in their new shape. All right? So just put your thumb on that seam, give it a little press, get it all like perfectly lined up, let it cool. Hey, if it doesn't work the first time, heat it up again. It doesn't mind. A little bit extra heat won't do anything to it. But again, now you can see that seam looking pretty darn good. So we're going to glue that, lock it in, call it good, and move on. Okay, so I got this glued, and again, the seam turned out really good on here. But note, this little cleft in here. Now, no, the part's not deformed, it's not misprinted, there's nothing like that going on. Can you see it? I don't. Yeah, there you go. It's not because of that. It's just because the this part itself just needs to be spread just like that. And now it's perfect. So what we're going to do, we're going to keep on going. As this is like a U shape, the hull eventually at the end is going to need to get formed properly and set to the correct width using the internal spacers and all that stuff that we've got going on. So what I'm trying to say is, if you end up with something like that, don't stress, don't worry. It's all good. We'll get it figured out. Just grab the rest of the boat, just keep tacking sections on. Just what I showed you, all right? Keep tacking sections on. It'll get easier as you go. This was a little harder up here because of the contour up front. The other pieces are more flat, going to be a lot easier to butt together. Good luck. See you on the other side. Proceeding with work on the lower hull. So we've assembled the upper hull. I've just got it set here where it's nice and safe. It's not going to get bumped or anything. So that is off to the side. And I'm just continuing work on the lower hull, just like we did on the upper hull. Get it in there. And the other thing I want to mention here, these clothespins are a really great tool for ensuring alignment, keeping everything all locked in. So you can clamp them on like that. The other tools that I failed to mention previously that you're absolutely going to want, some files. Use a little file set just to clean up seams, clean up parts. There's not a lot of flash on these parts at all, so you're not really going to need to clean that up like you would a traditional resin kit or even an injection molded kit for that matter. But you're going to want them for a little bit down the road. So if you don't already have one, hop online, grab yourself a set of nice little needle files, some detail files there. I'm just going to continue work assembling the lower hull. You see I got 2 more pieces to go over there, and then we'll touch base once I'm done. Okay, before we get too excited about continuing with the lower hull, of which the tail is going to be part, I want to talk about future mounting of the propeller in here. Now there's going to be 3 options. One is just going to be gluing this on the back. If you don't care about the prop spinning and you just want it to kind of be there and look cool, that's all you're going to do. You're just going to glue it on the back when you're done. Now, if you want it to spin, obviously we got to make like a bushing in there, and there's not really accommodation for that in the basic kit unless you're talking about the optional motorized version. So I want to talk a little bit about some options that you have for mounting the propeller. So the part that you're going to need is this tilting propeller assembly. Got a little flange on the bottom, and that's what you would connect a linkage to if you're going to make this remote control. This video is not about that. Don't worry about it, but we can still use this part. Grab a 1/8 inch drill bit, throw it in your drill, and just drill out these little side holes to 1/8. So we're going to drill that through. I skewered it right through the side. And then on the inside there, you can see a little hole. I'm going to drill that out to 1/8 of an inch as well. You don't need to go very deep, although you got a lot of keel to go through if you really needed to. And then you've got the side piece as well, and that looks like this. This is like the cover plate for this gargantuan gap in the tail. So we're going to do an 1/8 inch hole in that little hole. We're just going to open that up to 1/8. So now we are going to need to grab some 1/8 inch material. I use 1/8 inch brass rod. You can get it at any hobby store. You can get it online from Amazon, that kind of thing. You could use plastic as well, like 1/8 acrylic, anything that's 1/8 of an inch. I mean, hell, for that matter, you could probably use like a little wooden dowel or like skewer sticks that you get from the grocery store, all kinds of stuff like that. So let me go grab my 1/8 inch brass, and then we'll pick this up. Okay, this is what I was talking about, just 1/8 inch brass, solid brass tube. And you're going to want your rotary tool. Now you can probably get away with just some like side cutters or something like that, just whatever it takes to cut this. What I want to do before I start cutting though, I'm gonna round out the tip, taper it, make it like a spear, so it'll make getting this thing on. I'm gonna put on my approved safety glasses here. And this does not need to be long, like probably 1/2 inch. I'm just gonna cut off a 1/2 inch chunk. Round off the next piece and a 1/2 inch chunk. Okay, so 2 little 1/2 inch chunks. Be careful, these are hot if you cut them. Hot. Yeah. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to press this into both this part and the part in the boat, in the tail section. I'm just going to press it in there until just 1/8 of an inch sticks out. All it needs to do is catch our drilled out little piece right here. So we want 1/8 of an inch sticking out. And you can use pliers for that or whatever. It's also good, by the way, to round the other side so that it's a double taper, one on each side. And I'm just going to grab some pliers so that I can just squish it in. And because I've got a shop, I've got bigger tools. You could just use a hammer, tap it in, you know, whatever. Grab that in there like that, and give it a little squeeze. Boop. There, see? 1/8 of an inch sticking out. And do the same thing on the tail section here. And now I got an 1/8 inch sticking out in there. I don't know if you can see that. My camera's video screen is like the size of a postage stamp, so I can't really see what I'm doing. So now we've got the mounting hardware for our tilting assembly. What I'm going to do is just grab a 1/4 inch bit, and open up the little hole in here. Perfecto. Now our propeller shaft will, in theory, slip right into it, like that. What I'm going to be doing is rigging up this propeller spinning apparatus, also known as motor, geared motor. And in order to do that, we're going to need to make some more modifications in order to get it mounted. So let's take a look at that. So to begin the mounting process for the micro motor there, we're going to need to grab our prop, and we need 2 pieces of brass tube. This is 3/16 and 5/32, and when you buy these, they actually end up sleeving into each other. The idea is we want to go from that 3/16 diameter down to 1/8, which is what our motor is. When you do that, this just ends up fitting perfectly inside the prop. Overall length of both pieces of brass tube, 30 millimeters, 30 millimeters. Once you've got that done, you can go ahead and insert that in the prop. Little bit of thin CA, and you glue it and make this all one solid assembly with your brass inserts. So now that we have that done, I'm just going to go ahead and put it in place. in the little holder bracket thing here. Put the motor in place, and then I'm going to slide that back until the face of that bracket is interfacing with the face of the motor bracket. That's going to assure centralization of the shaft. And now all we're going to do is glue or adhere that bracket to the motor permanently. And you can use a little bit of medium CA or gel CA. Just make sure you don't get any in the gears. You just want to make sure that this is going to be permanently adhered there. And just use your rotary tool, rough up that leading face, and that'll assure a really good bond. So here is the completed motor assembly. You notice I soldered on some wires on the back. Basic soldering skills. I'm going to assume and hope if you're going to be working with LED lights and the motors, you have those basic skills and basic tools. Positive goes to the positive, negative goes to the negative. Don't need to insulate because there's nothing for them to touch. But you can see I've adhered that with a little bit of that rubberized cyanoacrylate. And if you just take the motor, slip it on right there, it just goes over perfectly, just like that. So, I mean, obviously this is spinning because it's slipping on the shaft in there. That's not going to get rectified until we quasi-permanently adhere that after the entire model is assembled. But what we can do is test this, and in order to do that, I'm just going to use a standard 9-volt battery. Put the negative on the negative. Now this motor works from 6 to 12 volts. If you want to get fancy, you can actually get a voltage regulator off of Amazon. They're pretty cheap, and they've got like a dial, and you can dial the voltage from 0 to whatever the maximum of your power source is. So my motor is spinning nice and freely in there, and like I said, it's slipping on the shaft, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't glue any gears or anything. But it is spinning. It's nice and quiet. Spins at about 60 RPM at 12 volts. So now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and install it in the tail of the boat. And to do that, we're just going to slip these wires in here. You'll notice I put a pretty healthy length of wire on the back there. This can be installed upside down, forward, back, left, right, whatever you want to do. Once you get your alignment worked out by putting the prop in there like this, once you get the alignment worked out, up, down, left, right, get that prop shaft centered, you can put a little drop of glue on the bottom. That'll lock it in place, and then we will move on to installing the cover. So I've got it installed there. Just going to check and make sure everything is free spinning, not binding. It's centralized in our little hole in the back there. And now what we need to do, last of all, and I'm going to take the prop off so I don't damage it or whatever. You don't need to put any adhesive on this side because we've already secured it to the other side. We're just going to take our cover, and this is a pretty tight tolerance, which obviously is what you want, but just slip it in. Takes a little bit of finagling. So you can see, you can not even see the seam in that part, and in theory it's completely removable again in a dire situation where the motor were to fail or whatever, but you'll be able to get back in there, and no need for adhesives of any kind. We're just gonna leave it just like that, and we're all set to install in the stern of the boat. All right, you can see I've flipped the lower hull over. I've sanded the lower hull interface there. I'll grab my glue, lay up our bead, and again this tail section is adhered to the lower hull. When you look at this, you've got a tall fin, and a short fin, this is up. The tall pointy fin goes up, which is down because I've got this upside down, if that makes sense. Just going to put this right in place, make sure that it is perfect, and a little spritz of ditza, and just let it kick off. So this is what it looks like. Again, you can't even see that seam. That's pretty awesome. Just a little barely there, and that'll clean up once we do our little sanding. So that's what that looks like. And this is the overall lower hull sitting on the stand upside down. All right, it is time now to bust out your 3M 5200 fast cure. I just got a little 1 ounce tube here in my hand, but you probably want to invest in a 3-ounce tube. It's about $18 on Amazon. The reason I'm using this, number one, it's easy to use. Number two, it's really bulletproof. But number three, it's a lot easier than going with something more like a 2-part epoxy and fiberglass cloth, which is what you would do in the case of an RC build, and we'll do that in a separate video. But for this is going to be more than suitable just to lock all of these in place. Now, is it going to be fine just using CA? Probably. Do you want to be picking this up to transport it around and have it break in half on you? Probably not. This is just an insurance policy, all right? So what we're going to end up doing here, I'm going to flip this around. And what we're going to do is take our sandpaper and sand about 1 inch on either side of the seam. And then we're going to take our 5200 and we're going to put a bead of it that extends all the way across on both sides. That is what you're going to end up looking like, a big goobery mess that is absolutely bulletproof. Now, I would wait about a day after you do all of the seams just to give this a chance to fully cure out. All right, it is now time for some reflection. It is time to take a step back and look at the wonder that you just created, not just for your own self-gratification, but to make sure you did things properly. So let's take a look. So if you put the boat together correctly and all of your seams are put together nice and tight, then alignment overall should not pose an issue. I've got this sitting down on top of the lower hull. There's a flange that fits in the back. It looks like I could pull a little bit back there, but what you're looking for on the inside, you can see these two seams right here. And once they're in the proper position, they're basically flush, basically touching. If we pull this off, there we go. There's that flange I was talking about. And I'll just turn this up so you can see there's a channel in the lower hull and a flange in the upper hull. The flange goes into the channel, and that is what ensures your alignment, upper and lower. So what you want to do at this point, test fit your hull. Before you go crazy with all of the details and everything, you want to make sure that your fitment is good in case you need to do some large changes to that fitment. So check the boat, make sure everything is fitting well. You are going to be able to do, wiggle stuff when you do final assembly of the upper and lower hull, but you want to make sure you're very, 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 very close now so that your battle later on is an easy one. So for the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to start installing some of these detail parts. And these are the ones you're going to want to fetch out of your parts pile. You've got cleats, bollards, the skiff hold down rungs, rings, handles, hatches, your deck rating, your dorsal fin, the large one. Remember there was 3 of them. This is the biggest one. Hatch, your 4 prop shroud supports, and your 2 prop shrouds. We're going to start at the back and work our way forward. So let's grab our prop shrouds and stick them on the boat. All right, weapon of choice in this endeavor. Fin, cyanoacrylate. That's the water stuff. We're going to take our prop shrouds, and you'll notice, looking at them from the top, you've got the flange side and a smooth side. Smooth side goes back, all right? And before we do anything, we just want to do a little test fit. So we're going to put them over these little tabs sticking out in the back here, okay? Push them on, push them on. They should basically friction fit, just like that. So cool. I'm going to grab the other one. We're going to do the same thing, flush side out. When you're happy with the fitment, you can go ahead and secure it with a tiny drop of thin cyanoacrylate. Now, with your prop rings secured permanently into place, we're going to move on to the prop ring supports here, and this is what they look like. Now, I do want you to note that these are prone to warping. It's thin, they're long. It's, you know, ground zero for warpage issues. You can see this one's got little tiny hook to it. But fear not, it's super easy to rectify this situation. You can just take a straight edge, and underneath my towel here there is a nice flat table. And then if you heat this up, it will relax, and then if you keep it locked into position, it will cool in that straight position. So if you need to make any adjustments, you can certainly do that. Although I will also say that by simply putting it in place, you can twist that flange and it'll straighten right out. So all is certainly not lost. Really, that heat scenario would be what you would only be looking to do in the case of an extreme warp. But put all four of them in. They just go in the slots and the slots. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, before we start adding more greeblies to the upper hull, we need to do a little painting, pre-painting. And the reason for that is because we are very quickly going to be moving on to the grates, and you don't want to have bright white resin showing from underneath your grates. You want like a dark shadow. So I'm just going to set this up here for now. You're going to want to make sure you got some spray paint. Very specific spray paint. No, it's not. This is Ace Hardware. I got flat black. That's all you're after. Premium. You know it's good. What we're going to do is hose down a couple of areas on this boat. 3, 4, 5, 6 areas. What we want is basically the entire inner hull. And the reason for that is if you're electing to go with a lighting kit, you don't want light bleed through. That's where the LED lights bleed through and you see them shining through the hull. It's kind of distracting and yucky looking. So the entire interior of the lower hull, the entire interior of the upper hull, and if we put this up here, the other place that we're going to hit is all of the recesses for the deck grating. So basically, we're just going to hose this thing down in black, and don't worry about the overspray. There's going to be so much weathering and details that nothing is gonna shine through here at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and hose this down. I'll show you what it looks like when you're done. There we go. Nothing fancy, just hosed it down. Nice thick coat. Doesn't matter if you get runs. Nobody's gonna see it anyway. One thing I will note, it can be hard to get like up in this area. So if you spray through the opposite Salon opening, you can actually get up in there much easier. So I'm going to flip this over now and hit the deck grates. And there we go. You're like, oh my god, my white model. It's actually kind of easier to see the details with the black paint. But at any rate, just make sure you get all of the inside there. And one thing I want to note here, before we get too excited, you can see there may be a little gap. That's about 0.5 millimeter in there. Don't stress about it, because the grill, the deck grate, is going to be covering up the vast majority of that, and then the wheelhouse is going to be over on top. So there's only going to be maybe a 1 or 2 millimeter spot that you'll be able to see that. If it bothers you, put a little tiny little bit of filler in there. You know, same thing. It'll just be a seam, you know, right here with the dorsal fin. But don't stress about it. You're not going to see it. There's a lot going on to draw the eye. I don't think a little tiny seam, especially in a boat full of them, is going to be a big deal. So let's let this thing kick off, get nice and dry, and then we'll move on to forward installation of the hold down rings for the skiff. All right, we're putting our little hold down wheels on, and they just go in the little receptacles just like that. Nothing complicated. If you want them to lay a little bit lower, you can trim the stand out a little bit. In the movie, they were actually canted out a little bit like that. So you could also install them like that, if you like to. All right, onto the deck grates. And now these fit in really nice. They're basically friction fit in here. You'll notice you're going to want to clean out in between, you know, here if there's a few little reinforcement bars or anything like that. But again, thin CA is going to be your friend. And the one thing I will say, you'll want to pin it down maybe with like a hobby knife, not your finger. If you do it on your finger on the side, that glue will flow down and up into your finger and fuse you to your boat, but then also leave a gigantic fingerprint in relief on there. So just get it in place, you know, hold it down, thin CA around the perimeter. Same for these pieces, and you should be in good shape. And this is what you should end up with once you've got all of your decorating in place. Super cool. Next two pieces, the dorsal fin and the hatch. Both of these are going to be put in place at the same time. So what we're actually going to start with, we're going to install the hatch onto the dorsal fin, because that is what's going to establish the spacing to get that perfect. So what you can do, although I wouldn't recommend it, you can just try and massage that hatch onto the fin. But, you know, the resin has a certain degree of brittleness to it, and I don't want to risk snapping that off. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take my torch and I'm going to heat up one arm just a little bit until it starts to move. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to slip it onto the hinge and just pinch it. Just pinch it with my finger until it cools down. What that heat does is it relaxes the plastic and allows it to become a little bit more malleable so that you don't risk breaking off the arm. If you do, it's not the end of the world, but if you don't need to do the work, why would you? So now that we've got our floppy hatchy thing all done, we're going to put it in place and then just lay the dorsal fin down, making sure that this is kind of centered a little bit. Okay. That has established our, you know, spacing on the y-axis of the boat to make sure that it opens and closes really well. Now all you need to do is one of two things. You need to sight along the boat to make sure that this is vertical, or you can get a small square and make that a perfectly vertical installation of your dorsal fin. A little drop of glue, and you've got that locked in place. There's one more thing that we are going to do before we sign off on this chapter, and that's the installation of the cleats and the bollards. All right? They just get set right in place, and if you take a look on the other side here, you can see indentations where they go. Super self-explanatory. The big ones are the bollards, small ones are the cleats. It goes bollard, cleat, bollard, and there's an indentation, if you look here on the side, for cleat right there. So adhere those with your thin CA, both sides, and you'll be in good shape. So at this point, you should have something that looks pretty much like this. Now I've just got the wheelhouse sitting loosely in place for the gratification that it gives me to look at it like this. But we are going to end the first chapter of the build right here. If you've come this far, congratulations. A lot of the hard work is over with. We're into fun stuff now. Next chapter is actually going to focus on the optional Salon kit that's going to get installed in the boat before we button it up. So, by all means, please join me for that. I hope you enjoyed this first in the series of build videos for this 1/48 scale Disney Nautilus. Again, this is Bob Martin, the RCSubGuy, and I appreciate you chiming in. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you in Chapter 2.